The massive warship drifted through the dark void of space like a sleeping giant. Its metal hull stretched for miles, covered in weapons that could destroy entire planets. Inside the ship, thousands of warriors stood in perfect rows, their bodies motionless as statues. Commander Vex 7742 opened his silver eyes and stepped forward from his charging pod. He was 7 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished metal and muscles that never grew tired. His bones were made stronger with titanium, and his brain had computer chips that could think faster than any normal creature. He was a construct, a perfect warrior made in a laboratory. "System check complete," he said in a voice that sounded like cold metal. "All units operational." Around him, other construct warriors activated their systems. Each one costs more money than most planets made in a year. Their creators had spent centuries making them perfect. They could see in the dark, run faster than vehicles, and never felt fear or pain. They were the ultimate weapons. Vex 7742 walked to the command center where holographic displays showed their target, a small blue planet called Earth, spinning slowly in the darkness. The data streams flowed into his mind like water, telling him everything about this world. "Primitive species detected," he announced to his fellow commanders. "No genetic modifications, no cybernetic enhancements. Technology level far below galactic standards." The other construct nodded. They had conquered hundreds of worlds just like this one. Advanced civilizations with powerful weapons usually surrendered quickly when they saw the construct army. Primitive worlds like Earth would fall in days, but something in the data made Vex 7742's advanced mind pause. These creatures called humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years, not just against invaders, but against each other. Their entire history was written in blood and conflict. "Curious," he said, his silver eyes studying the information. "They have survived 12,000 documented conflicts. Logic suggests they should have eliminated themselves." His second in command, Tex 9901, stepped beside him. "Damn. Perhaps they are too primitive to wage effective war." "No," Vex 7742 replied, his computer brain processing millions of data points. "Their weapons are crude, but effective. Their tactics are ... unusual. They do not follow standard military protocols." The data showed something strange. No enhanced strength, no improved reflexes, no computer-assisted thinking. They were exactly as nature had made them millions of years ago. Yet somehow they had survived wars that should have destroyed them completely. Estimated resistance duration? Aztecs-9901, Vex-774, Two's neural implants, calculated thousands of variables, 4.7 standard rotations, minimal casualties expected. Even as he spoke, something felt wrong. The numbers were clear, but there was something in the human data that his perfect mind could not understand. These creatures had learned to fight before they learned to build cities. They had mastered war before they mastered science. "Begin invasion protocols," he commanded. The great ship hummed to life. In the cargo bays, thousands of drop pods prepared for launch. Each pod contained a single construct warrior, armed with weapons that could level buildings and armor that could stop tank shells. They were the product of the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, created for one purpose: to wage war with mathematical precision. Vex-7742 returned to his battle station and began the final preparations. His body was perfect, his mind enhanced, his equipment flawless. He had never known defeat because defeat was not programmed into his systems. Fear was an emotion he could not feel. Doubt was a concept he could not understand. The hegemony had created the construct to be the ultimate warriors. They were stronger, faster, and smarter than any natural creature. They could process battlefield information in microseconds and adapt to any situation. They were living weapons, designed to conquer and control. As the ship entered Earth's solar system, Vex 7742 reviewed the battle plans one final time. The humans would see their ships and surrender immediately. If they chose to fight, they would be crushed quickly and efficiently. It was simple mathematics. But deep in his electronic mind, something whispered that this would not be like other conquests. These humans had something the construct did not possess. Something that could not be built in a laboratory or programmed into a computer. They had been shaped by millions of years of survival, forged in the fires of endless conflict. The construct were built for war, created with every advantage their makers could imagine. But humans were born from war itself, molded by struggle and hardship into something no engineer could design. The invasion was about to begin, and neither side truly understood what they were about to face. The construct expected an easy victory over primitive creatures. The humans had no idea that perfect warriors were coming to destroy their world, in the space between worlds. Two very different kinds of fighters prepared to meet. One side had been manufactured for conquest. The other had been forged by survival. The war that would change both species forever was about to begin. The sky over Seoul burned red as hundreds of metal pods crashed through the clouds like falling stars. Each impact shook the ground and sent cars flying through the air. People screamed and ran as smoke filled the streets, but there was nowhere to hide from what was coming. Captain Lee Han pressed his back against the concrete wall of a destroyed building and checked his rifle. 23 years old, average height, with calloused hands from years of military training. He looked like any other soldier, but his eyes held something special. They had seen war before, and they were not afraid. "How many?" whispered Private Parkman beside him, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Hune peered around the corner and counted the enemy forces spreading across the plaza. "Too many," he said quietly, "but that never stopped us before." First, construct emerged from their landing pods like nightmares made real. 7 feet tall, with silver skin and glowing red eyes, they moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons hummed with energy, and their armor looked like it could stop a tank shell. They arranged themselves in neat rows, advancing like a machine. Built for killing. Commander Vex 7742 stepped onto the broken pavement and scanned the area with his enhanced vision. His computer mind processed every detail of the battlefield in seconds. Hiding humans detected behind cover. Weapons identified as primitive ballistic firearms. Threat level assessed as minimal. Resistance is futile, he broadcast through speakers. Built into his throat. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. But instead of surrender, something unexpected happened. A small explosive device rolled out from behind a burned car and detonated near the construct formation. The blast was not powerful enough to seriously damage their armor, but it surprised them. The humans were fighting back. "Impossible," muttered Tex 9901, as he watched 3 more explosions bloom across the plaza. "They should be terrified." Vex 7742's neural implants analyzed the attack patterns. These were not random acts of desperation. Humans were using coordinated tactics, hitting weak points in the construct formation. They were fighting like they understood war. Captain Hayen signaled to his squad with hand gestures. They had practiced these movements thousands of times until they could communicate without words. Private Parkman nodded and disappeared into the shadows with 2 other soldiers. Sergeant Kim Woo took position on the 2nd floor of a damaged building. The trap was set. The construct advanced according to their programming, each step calculated for maximum efficiency. But the humans did not fight like the computer simulations had predicted. They used the destroyed city like a weapon, turning every piece of rubble into cover and every shadow into an ambush point. When the shooting started, it was nothing like the construct expected. The human weapons were primitive, but they were used with deadly skill. Bullets struck the joints in their armor, the weak points their creators had never imagined anyone would find. The humans aimed for sensors and weapon systems, not trying to destroy the construct, but to disable them. Vex-7742 watched in confusion as his perfect warriors stumbled and fell, not from superior firepower, but from tactics that made no logical sense. Humans threw themselves at objectives with no strategic value. They sacrificed their lives to save wounded comrades who would only slow them down. "They are not fighting efficiently," he reported to the command ship. "They waste resources, protecting non-essential personnel." But even as he spoke, Those same inefficient humans were winning. Private Parkman had crawled through a drainage pipe to emerge behind the construct lines. She planted explosives on their communication equipment before disappearing back into the maze of broken buildings. Without their perfect coordination, the construct began to make mistakes. Captain Heian led a charge across the plaza, his soldiers following without question. They had no enhanced strength or computer-assisted reflexes, but they had something the construct did not understand. They had learned to fight by fighting, not by programming. The battle raged for hours. The construct had every advantage there. Creators could give them, but the humans had something that could not be built in a laboratory. They had experience. They had instinct. They had the desperate courage of creatures who had learned to survive. Against impossible odds, when the first construct fell to a trap made from household chemicals, Vex 774, to experience something his programming had no name for, was perfect. Mind tried to calculate what was happening, but the variables did not add up. These primitive creatures were defeating his superior forces through methods that defied every military principle he knew. Status report demanded the command ship Vex-7742 looked at the battlefield where his warriors lay broken among the human dead. Both sides had paid a terrible price, but something had changed. The humans were not just fighting back. They were learning from each encounter, adapting faster than his forces could counter. Enemy resistance is unexpected, he finally replied. They do not behave according to tactical predictions. The truth was beginning to dawn on his electronic consciousness. The construct had been built for war, but they had been built for a specific kind of war. Clean, calculated, predictable. The humans had been born from a different kind of conflict entirely. They had learned to fight in chaos, to find victory in defeat, to turn weakness into strength. The invasion was not going according to plan. 3 months had passed since the Silver Warriors fell from the sky. The city of Seoul looked like a graveyard during the day, with broken buildings and empty streets. But when darkness came, the city came alive with a different kind of energy. The humans had learned to make the night their friend, deep beneath the ruins. In tunnels that had once carried subway trains, Dr. Kim Jae worked by the light of a single candle. His hands moved quickly over a collection of broken electronics, old batteries and kitchen supplies. To most people, it looked like junk. To him, it was a weapon waiting to be born. "Pass me that wire," he said quietly to the young woman beside him. Private Parkman handed him the copper wire she had pulled from a destroyed television. She had changed in the past 3 months, no longer the frightened soldier who had hidden. Behind concrete walls, she now moved through the darkness like a ghost. Her eyes were sharper, her movements more confident. "Will it work?" she asked, watching him connect the wire to a small device made from a cell phone and cleaning chemicals. "It better," Kim Jae replied with a tired smile. "The metal ones are getting smarter. We need to get smarter too." Above them, the city belonged to the construct. Their silver forms patrolled the streets in perfect formation, their red eyes scanning for any sign of human activity. They had taken control of all the important buildings, set up checkpoints at every intersection, and established communication networks that should have made resistance impossible. But the humans had learned to fight a different kind of war. Commander. Vex 7742 stood in his command center, studying the reports that came in every hour. His forces controlled the surface, but casualties continued to mount. Not from direct battles, but from attacks that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Another supply convoy destroyed," reported Tex 9901. "No survivors, no evidence of heavy weapons." Vex 7742's electronic mind processed the information. The humans were using tactics that made no sense according to his programming. They attacked targets with no strategic value, then disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They wasted their limited resources on operations that should have been pointless. "How?" he asked, his voice showing the first hint of frustration. "Unknown," Tex 9901 replied. "They appear to be using improvised explosive devices made from common household items. Our sensors cannot detect them until activation." In the tunnels below, Captain Lee Hyun gathered his resistance fighters around a map drawn on the concrete wall. The map showed the city as it really was now, not as it appeared on official charts. Secret passages, hidden supply routes, safe houses that changed location every few days. It was a different soul, one that existed in the shadows. They think like computers, Hyun explained to his team. Everything has to follow rules, patterns, logical sequences. But war is not logical. War is jazz music. You feel the rhythm and play along. He pointed to several locations on the map. Tomorrow, we hit 3 different targets at the same time, not because they are important, but because they are not important. We make them waste resources protecting things that do not matter. The plan was simple and complex at the same time. One team would attack a water treatment plant that was already broken. Another would strike at an empty warehouse that looked important, but contained nothing. The third would create a loud distraction near the main construct base, drawing their attention away from the real objective. What is the real objective? Asked Sergeant Kim Woo. Dahane smiled. What? To confuse them? To make them think in circles. To prove that their perfect minds cannot understand imperfect humans. Dr. Kim Jae finished his device and handed it to Park Min. It looked like a broken radio, but inside it was something much more dangerous. Plant this near their communication tower, he said. When they try to scan it, it will give them false information. What kind of false information? The kind that makes them see patterns that do not exist. The kind that makes them solve problems that are not real. That night, the attacks began. Explosions echoed through the city as the human teams struck their targets. The construct responded, exactly as predicted, sending forces to protect locations that did not need protection. Their perfect coordination became a weakness as they tried to defend everything at once. Vex-774 to watch the chaos unfold on his tactical displays. His warriors moved with mathematical precision, but they were always one step behind. The humans fought like the wind, impossible to catch or predict. They used the city itself as a weapon, turning every shadow into a hiding place and every piece of rubble into a trap. They are not following standard guerrilla protocols, he reported to the command ship. Their actions defy military logic. Even as he spoke, Vex-7742 began to understand something his creators had never programmed into him. The humans were not just fighting a war, they were creating art. Each attack was like a piece of music, improvised and unique. They were not trying to win through superior force. They were trying to win through superior imagination. For the first time in his existence, the perfect warrior began to question the nature of perfection itself. The war was changing both sides, but the humans were changing faster. The rain fell on soul-like tears from a broken sky. Commander Vex-7742 stood alone on the roof of his command building. Watching the water drip from his silver fingers, something was wrong with him. His perfect mind was making decisions that his programming could not explain. That morning, he had ordered his troops to take a different route through the city. Not because the tactical computer suggested it, but because something inside him whispered that it was the right choice. The humans had planted explosives on the original route. His strange feeling had saved 20 construct lives. System diagnostic complete, he said to himself, running another check on his electronic brain. No errors detected. But the feeling remained. It was like having a voice in his head that spoke without words, showing him things that his sensors could not detect. His creators had never programmed him to feel hunches or follow instincts. Yet here he was, acting on impulses that had no logical foundation, deep in the underground tunnels. Private Park Min moved through the darkness like a creature born for war. 6 months of fighting had changed her completely. She no longer needed light to navigate the subway tunnels. Her body had learned to read the air currents, to hear the tiny sounds that warned of danger ahead. Contact ahead, she whispered into her radio, using words that Captain Lee Hoon would understand but the construct could not decode. 3 silver fish swimming upstream. It was their code for enemy patrol. Fish meant soldiers, silver meant construct, and upstream meant they were moving toward the human base. She had developed this language with her team, creating communication that felt natural to humans but confused the enemy's translation systems. Captain Hune received the message and smiled. Parkman had become something extraordinary, not enhanced by technology like the enemy, but enhanced by pure human will. She could sense danger before it appeared, move through hostile territory like smoke through air, and fight with an instinct that no computer could match. "Understood," he replied. "Dance with them." Dancing was their code for engaging the enemy using unpredictable tactics. Parkman nodded and began to move, her team following like shadows. They'd learned to fight as a single organism, each person. Knowing what the others would do without speaking, the construct patrol moved through the tunnel in perfect formation. Their enhanced vision could see in complete darkness. Their sensors could detect heat signatures from hundreds of meters away. They were superior to humans in every measurable way, but they could not measure what Parkman had become. She struck from above, dropping from a ventilation shaft to land silently behind the last construct in line. Her weapon was a simple knife, but she used it with surgical precision, hitting the exact spot where the enemy's armor joints met. The construct fell without making a sound. The other two turned to investigate, their movements coordinated and efficient. But Parkman was already gone, vanishing into the maze of pipes and cables that ran along the tunnel ceiling. She had learned to use the enemy's perfection against them. They always moved in predictable patterns, always responded to threats in the same way Tex-9901 activated his enhanced hearing and scanned the area. "Target has disappeared. No heat signature detected." "Impossible," replied the other construct. "Human cannot simply vanish." But Parkman had not vanished. She had become something that their sensors could not understand. She had learned to control. Her body heaved to move without disturbing the air, to become invisible not through technology, but through pure skill developed under the pressure of survival. When she struck again, it was from a direction they had not considered. She emerged from a drainage pipe, moving like water itself, and disabled their weapons before they could react. The construct were stronger and faster, but she was something they could not compute. Unpredictable. Above ground, Vex 7742 felt the strange sensation again. Its tactical display showed that the patrol had stopped responding, but something else was happening. His electronic consciousness was experiencing what humans might call worry. He was concerned about his soldiers, not because they were valuable equipment, but because they were ... important to him. "This is not logical," he said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty command center, his second in command. Tex-9901 had also begun to change. The constant exposure to human unpredictability was affecting all the construct. They were developing new neural pathways, learning to think in ways their creators never intended. Commander Tex-9901 said, his voice carrying a tone that sounded almost like uncertainty. "I have been experiencing irregularities," explained Vex. 7742 replied, though he already knew what his subordinate was going to say. "I have begun to make decisions based on incomplete data. I have started to anticipate enemy actions without sufficient logical foundation. Yesterday, I chose to spare a wounded human child when tactical protocols required elimination." Vex 7742 nodded slowly. They were evolving, changing into something their creators had never planned. The constant battle with humans was reprogramming their minds, teaching them to think beyond pure logic. Meanwhile, in the tunnels, Parkman and her team had eliminated the entire construct patrol without losing a single person. They had become something new as well, pushing the boundaries of human capability through sheer determination and the desperate need to survive. Both sides were transforming in different ways. The construct were learning to be more than machines. The humans were learning to be more than merely human. The war was forging them both into something unprecedented. The morning sun cast long shadows across the destroyed plaza, where two warriors faced each other. Commander Vex 7742 stood perfectly still, his silver skin reflecting the light like a mirror. Across from him, Captain Lee Hin held his rifle steady, his human eyes showing no fear despite the impossible odds he had faced for 8 months. Between them lay the ruins of Seoul. Broken buildings reached toward the sky like the fingers of buried giants. The streets were filled with the debris of war, but something had changed. The fighting had stopped 3 days ago, not because one side had won, but because both sides had finally understood something important. "You came here to conquer us," Hyen said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent plaza. "But something went wrong with your plan." Vex 7742's red eyes focused on the human captain. His electronic mind had been processing this moment for weeks, trying to understand what had happened to his perfect invasion. "We were built for war," he replied, his voice no longer cold and mechanical. "Created with every advantage our makers could design." "But you were built for someone else's war," Hyen continued, lowering his weapon slightly. "Clean battles, logical enemies, predictable outcomes." The construct commander felt something stirring in his artificial consciousness. Over the months of fighting, he had changed in ways his creators never intended. His perfect programming had been altered by exposure to human unpredictability. He had learned to feel uncertainty, to experience something that might be called curiosity, even to care about the welfare of his soldiers. "We were born from war," Hyen said, his words carrying the weight of truth. "Shaped by millions of years of conflict. We learned to fight before we learned to think. We mastered survival before we mastered science." Behind Vex 7742, other construct warriors emerged from the shadows. But they were different now. Their perfect formations had been replaced by something more natural. They moved with individual purpose rather than collective programming. War had taught them to be more than weapons. Behind Hyen, human soldiers appeared from the ruins. Private Parkman stepped forward, her eyes alert but not hostile. Sergeant Kim Woo kept his weapon ready but pointed toward the ground. Dr. Kim Jae carried a device that could level half the plaza, but his finger was nowhere near the trigger. "Why did you stop fighting?" Vex 7742 asked, genuinely curious about the answer. Hyen smiled, the expression transforming his tired face. "Because we realized something. You were not just invading our world. You were becoming part of it. Every battle changed you a little more. You started making choices that your programming could not explain. It was true." 3 days ago, Vex 7742 had been ordered to destroy a human hospital. The building contained wounded resistance fighters who posed no immediate threat. His tactical systems had calculated that eliminating them would reduce future enemy strength. But when he arrived at the hospital, he found something that stopped him cold. Human doctors and nurses were treating wounded construct soldiers alongside their own people. They were using their limited medical supplies to save the lives of enemies who had tried to kill them. It made no logical sense, but it was the most logical thing he had ever seen. "You spared our wounded," Parkman said, stepping closer to the construct commander. "Even when your orders said to eliminate them." VEX 7742 nodded slowly. "They were defenseless. They posed no tactical threat. Killing them would serve no purpose." "That was not your programming talking," Hyen observed. "That was something else, something you learned from fighting us." The truth was becoming clear to both sides. The construct had been built for war, but they had been built for a specific kind of war, mathematical, predictable, efficient. But humans had been forged by a different kind of conflict. Entirely chaotic, emotional, desperate, and that chaos had infected the perfect warriors, teaching them to think beyond their original limitations. "We have evolved." Vex 7742 said the words, feeling strange in his artificial throat. "We have become something our creators did not intend." "So have we," Hyen replied. "We have pushed ourselves beyond what we thought was possible. We've become more than human through the simple act of refusing to give up." The two groups stood in the ruined plaza, former enemies who had transformed each other through conflict. The construct had learned creativity, intuition, and compassion. The humans had learned to fight with a precision and determination that bordered on superhuman. Vex 7742 made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He deactivated his weapon systems and stepped forward, extending his silver hand toward the human captain. "We choose to stay," he said, It's not as conquerors, but as something new. Ian looked at the offered hand for a long moment, then reached out and grasped it. Human flesh met artificial skin, and both sides felt the weight of what they had become. The galaxy will never be the same, Heian said with a smile. Two species that were never meant to coexist, brought together by war and forged into something. Neither could have become alone. Above them, the hegemony fleet was already departing, leaving behind Construct who had chosen freedom over programming. The war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. They had learned that sometimes the greatest triumph was not defeating your enemy, but transforming them into something better than they were before.